This week on the Wake and Bake podcast.
That was like 8 rants. That's not one thing. That was just...
I told you, I have a lot of things I'm really mad about.
One of the things that I love that he said that just keeps circling back around in my head is that anything will give up its secrets if you love it enough. When I think back over the 12 years of learning about cannabis, you know, the times when I learned the most about it was when I was like, oh my gosh, just in reverence and awe, like not even looking at the problems necessarily, but looking at how incredible the plant is and staying super focused on that.
You said you would help me solve problems if they were solvable.
It came from him tuning in and listening to what both plants and people need. And that's our job too, right? Tuning in to listen to what the plant needs from us and what people need from us. When I say like tune into what the plant needs from us, there are many ways to take that. But when I'm just thinking about where it deserves to be, where I believe it deserves to be in the medicine cabinet, first and foremost, right?
That's fucking lovely. The problem that we have is all these other problems, and all of those are bullshit.
Hello, and welcome back to the delightfully spontaneous and sporadic Wake and Bake podcast. My name is Corinne Tobias, and I'm one of your co-hosts here today on this podcast. And today we're going to do something that we've never done before. Well, we're going to do something that we actually almost always accidentally do, but today we're going to do it on purpose. We're going to be talking about some of the things that drive us absolutely crazy in cannabis. Now, Andrea and I have been working in cannabis as cannabis educators for over 18 years. So we've seen things change and evolve and morph and devolve and get absolutely crazy over these past few years. So we decided to put it all into an episode. We decided to just get it all out there. Well, that's not true, actually. Andrea decided that she really wanted to get it all out there, and she talked me into it. And you'll see what happens as I try to come up with solutions and stay positive while we discuss a whole host of things that are really, really wrong in the world of cannabis. Now, before we get started, I want to let you know that this podcast has been sponsored by the Cannabis Coaching Institute, where we've trained over 600 certified cannabis educators and coaches who specialize in medical cannabis. And if you are interested in this kind of work, if you listen to this episode and you're like, wow, there are a lot of problems that need solving, and you have a little bit of George Washington Carver in you, and you'll know what I'm talking about in just a minute, then we would love for you to join us. Go to cannabiscoachinginstitute.com to check it out. Today's podcast is also sponsored by Wake and Bake. Now, I just released the digital download for my latest cookbook, the second edition of the Wake and Bake cookbook. It covers literally everything that you need to know in order to make almost everything on the dispensary shelves. And I'm so excited that it's out, and I love it so much, and I want to get it out into the world. And so for right now, you can get that book for just $4.20. Haha, I know I had to do it. So if you want to get in your kitchen and be making as much medicine as you possibly can to share with your friends and neighbors and be the dopest kitchen witch in town, go to the link below and grab your copy for just $4.20. All right, let's get started.
I've now written 2 entire emails about George Washington Carver, and I feel like there's a third one that I need to write about him.
Because you love him or because you hate him?
No, because I love him, and I think he's super fascinating. I think all American kids learn about the peanut guy, George Washington Carver. And for some reason, I hadn't thought about him forever. And I was looking for a story that I wanted to tell about someone who was in agriculture, who was a farmer, who did something revolutionary. And so I started looking for people throughout history who have done that, right? And I found George Washington Carver, and I was like, oh, the peanut guy. So I started looking into him, and had this insane childhood, right? He was born into slavery in what they think was maybe 1864. And his father died right before he was born in a farming accident. And then his mother and they were kidnapped by people who used to take slaves and try to steal them. And then he was returned as a baby, completely unharmed, but his mother was never heard from again. And so he's an infant, born into slavery. And as he grew up, he was physically quite weak, but he was really curious and he was really bright. And so they had him doing work within, the house, kind of household chores. And he quickly fell in love with plants, and he just wanted to know everything about them. And he became the plant doctor. And that's what everyone around the farm called him. He was just this little precocious kid who just wants to know everything about plants. And he was able to go to school at 12. He went on to higher education, being the first Black man in almost every area of education that went into. He went and got his bachelor's, then he got his master's, and then got his doctorate and started working at a university as the head of agriculture. And while he was there, his love for plants was obviously really strong. He's a botanist and he's really into ag, but he also was like horrified at the blight of small Southern farmers. And he knew that something was messed up, right? That he knew that their soil was depleted. They've been growing cotton and tobacco for years and years. And he was like, hey guys, your soil's depleted. That's why you're having all these issues. And they're like, this is why we've always been doing it. We're going to keep doing it. And he's like, how do I get these people to see that they need nitrogen in their soil? They need to fix this. And he was like, oh, you know what? I'll show them irrefutable truth. I'll give them soil tests. I'll test their soil and say, here you go. And he was one of the first people to do that, right? I mean, the technology was fairly new at that time. And he showed them that irrefutable truth. And many of them were kind of like, okay, well, I'm still going to keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
And like people do. And then he was like, okay. And then the boll weevil like started taking out cotton, right? It was this pest that almost took out the entire cotton industry. And they were looking for a new cash crop. And so he's like, hey guys, peanuts. And it's kind of silly when you think about it. You're like, okay, peanuts. And peanuts back then were used as an oil and like as a food and a replacement for cocoa. They didn't have many uses. Nobody was really eating them. They maybe have some boiled peanuts at the circus or whatever, but there was no peanut butter and jelly, I guess is what I mean to say. And the benefit of peanuts was that they fix nitrogen into the soil. So they'll put nitrogen back into the soil. So it solves all these problems, right? And so he gets them to do it. And he does that by creating 300 different ways that people can use peanuts. He creates this huge document. He like goes through and does all this testing. And he's like, okay, so he keeps looking at different angles of this, this problem. And he solves it in this really eloquent way that saves, Southern farming for better, for worse, right? We're talking about monoculture ag. It's a thing with a whole lot of problems to unpack, but I'm just thinking about him as an individual doing what he's done, coming from where he's come from. Like, what does it take to do that? And I was just writing, like these parallels that we have in the cannabis industry. Like we do have all of these problems. We've got all this stuff going on. And one of the things that I love that he said that just keeps circling back around in my head is that anything will give up its secrets if you love it enough. When I think back over the 12 years of learning about cannabis, the times when I learned the most about it was when I was like, oh my gosh, just in reverence and awe, like not even looking at the problems necessarily, but looking at how incredible the plant is and staying super focused on that. And so it kind of like set me up for talking about, one of the things we're going to talk about today, which is like, yes, there are all these problems, but I want to stay positive. I want to be in solutions-based mode. I'm here, I'm in Carver mindset, right? I just want to I'm like, okay, but how can we love it enough that these solutions come out? How can we love not just the plants, just like George Washington Carver did? He loved the people that grew the plants. So the people that are helped by the plant, how can we love everything enough so that we can figure out how to help people and how to help this plant as it comes back out from prohibition?
Yeah, I love that. And still I'm like ranty.
I guess then my question is, before we talk about this, is like the why rant. Why do we find ourselves doing this? What's the benefit of us talking about these problems in this particular way, of us being like, this is what really gets our gourd?
I have no idea. I just told you I wanted to rant about a whole bunch of things that are really pissing me off lately about the cannabis space and what's going on.
Okay, well, let's do it. I want to hear it. That's number one. What's the thing that's just really pissing you off? What's bullshit?
Like, I have so many, and I was trying to group them into categories. But for me, like the very first thing is medical access. How do we have this plant that is so beneficial for literally everything? And we know that it can do so in a better way, non-toxic, generally not addicting, with so many benefits compared to what we're using, which is, a single molecule pharmacy to try to solve shit. And then even if you do have a prescription, like I have a prescription and cannabis is super expensive under my prescription. I can actually get it cheaper from the rec store here. But how am I getting guidance on that? And doctors can't prescribe it, or we can prescribe in Canada, right? Like our doctors can prescribe it. in the States, your doctors can recommend it if they so choose, kind of thing. But they have to jump through so many hoops that it's like onerous on them. And so where are medical patients, for the vast majority of them, getting their advice from? Budtenders.
That was like eight rants. That's not one thing. That was just
I told you I have a lot of things I'm really mad about.
I'm so glad. Alice was telling me that she sometimes when she's in rant mode, that she just wishes that I would just stay there and be like, yep, that's really upsetting. I can see how you'd feel that way, instead of trying to solve the problem. So you know what? I'm just going to do that with you, Andrea. That is really, really frustrating.
You said you would help me solve problems if they were solvable. Do you see a solution here? Besides legalization?
Grow your own. The solution for you in Canada, because you all can grow your own, right? Every province can grow your own?
No, not every province can grow. Like Quebec, they're their own little country. They have like super strict rules. And like I know in Manitoba, they're trying to get it so they can grow their own. But
okay. Yeah. Well, okay. All right, pass. I did not solve the problem of medical access on this podcast.
Okay, next on my list, and this is the reason why we're talking about this instead, is because I wanted to talk about the issues or the concerns about testing, right? Lab testing. There's like a billion concerns that we have at the Cannabis Coaching Institute about what's going on with testing. And it turns out it's not really the testing I'm upset with. It's back to prohibition. The reason that we need to do so much testing on this plant, and the reason that we have all of these ridiculous manufactured cannabinoids, all of that goes back to this plant was prohibited. And so it went underground and people were producing it maybe with not the best intentions in mind, maybe profit in mind, maybe THC only in mind. And so now we're at this place in 2024 where as humans, we've been using this for fucking millennia. And now we have all these scary things that are associated with cannabis. We have scary ingestion methods like vape pens, which we obviously hate. We have these scary cannabinoids that we do not need. There are many possible medical uses for some of these minor cannabinoids that we're synthesizing and making, but we don't need to be vaping those into a vape pen. And in general, the vast majority of the population would do really, really well with THC, CBD, and maybe CBG, and the acidic ones too, as part of their kind of like diet. Mm-hmm. So, and all of that is because some very powerful white dudes wanted to make this plant illegal for reasons like racism, greed, and like just pure lying. And that blows my mind every time when I was thinking about the testing issue and all these frankencannabinoids that I'm like reading about and learning about. It all comes back to this shouldn't have been prohibited in the first place. And we're here in a kind of dangerous situation sometimes because of it.
But can I give you a but? Can I give a...
Yeah, please.
Okay. So what's interesting about that is that, yes, prohibition was bullshit and obviously came about for all the wrong reasons. I do think that it's interesting when I think about what has happened genetically with cannabis and some of the things like you talk about with CBG, like CBG exists because people got really, really good at breeding cannabis, selective breeding for certain qualities. And they were able to start lab testing, to see what kinds of compounds were in cannabis, as part of this whole rediscovery process, which kind of gave us that, right? They could say, oh, well, when I do this and this, then more CBG is produced. I can do that until now we have higher CBG plants.
Problem with lab testing isn't that we now know what's in our cannabis. That's fucking lovely. Like I love knowing that there's all these little minors in there and stuff. The problem that we have with lab testing is that labs are inflating their THC numbers, lying about what's actually in the plant, don't have the right standards to be able to test the things that we need. All these other problems, and all of those are bullshit. Like all of those things we don't need to know or we don't need to have.
Right. But we do. But that's the thing. It's like George Carver didn't look around and it was like, well, we shouldn't have soil that's completely depleted of nitrogen and we shouldn't have this boll weevil problem, right? Like that's what I'm trying to get us to do is like think outside of the box in a way that, I mean, obviously I was just trying to do a silver lining for prohibition. Mm-hmm. That was the only one I could come was like, well, CBG, which is terrible.
And the other thing is that sometimes people think when they learn about CBG, we have these products now because of really impressive breeders who are doing all of this work. It's not the same for all of these other minors. Like if you're trying to breed for THCV, it's possible that you're going to get to a point where maybe you're at like 5 or 10. I don't know. I don't even know if you get up to 10%, but is CBG, the reason that we're able to breed for that is because it's already in the plant to begin with. So there would have to be so much more done to breed plants that have all these other minors.
But we don't need the other minors. The minors are minors for the other minors. Why don't? No, I mean we don't need to make it like that doesn't. We don't need a 12% CBC because we don't know that. We don't even know what that does in the human body. Like I'm sure it's okay, but like
I'm sure CBC has many potential medicinal benefits. But we know that when prohibition happened and cannabis started to be bred, especially like in the 60s and 70s, that it all went indoors, right? Like we used to grow cannabis outdoors for millennia, obviously. When prohibition happened, everything went indoors and the breeders bred for high THC because that was what the market was looking for, because this is a prohibited substance. So you get like the most powerful stuff that you can. So we know that we've bred out a whole bunch of strains that had more balanced ratios, like way more CBD in them, way less THC in them, but that those also likely, I don't know if it's likely, that those also probably had more minors. I don't know if I'm making a leap here. My point is, if there was no prohibition, we would have just continued with our millennia of these plants that have grown and adapted to their circumstances. And we could have just used those.
That's true. I mean, there would probably be no dabs. Like we wouldn't have had any reason for dabs. But this isn't the game we're playing. The game we're playing is solutions. You rant. I have none. I don't have any solutions.
Well, that's next on my list, is because those two are so intricately combined that not only are we making frankencannabinoids, which holy shit, the podcast I just listened to on Curious About Cannabis, and if you haven't listened to that podcast and you are a science nerd, like please go check it out. The stuff that they were talking about people making, like literally just manufacturing these cannabinoids in their labs, and like, did they know what they were doing? And were they blowing themselves up with like actual like lab bombs and stuff? And what are you getting out of it? Like when these two super nerdy dudes are talking about, I don't know, like bumps on a chromatography something, and they're like, we don't know what this bump is. What do you mean you don't know what this bump is? Like, I want to know what you just made. So,
yeah. And people are consuming it. That's the part. I mean, we're going on a very roundabout way. Now we're talking about frankencannabinoids. There's so many things to be pissed off about in so many different layers, but that there's no consumer protection. And that bump could do something really crazy that we've never seen in the human body before, which, like, you know, in reality, it's 2024. We're all part of a large scale, you know, human trial on all sorts of chemistry, you know, like, you know, phthalates, all sorts of stuff. There are all sorts of volatile chemicals in our environment at all times. Not to freak anybody out, but this is the rant episode. So you kind of tuned in to get a little like, whoa. So we're just giving you what you came for. But still, like the idea that not only do we have all these cannabinoids, not only are they manufactured in a way that has no standard processes, not only have they never been, you know, tested in the human body at the levels that these products are created at, right, at these percentages. And they're also creating entirely new compounds that have never been inside of a human body before. And they're selling them at gas stations. And I'm like, what in the actual hell?
Or they're selling them at places where people think, oh, I'm getting cannabis. I've heard this is a medicine. I've heard this could be helpful for this, this, and this. So we used to have cannabis as a medicine, and that's what helped to legalize cannabis as it's been, you know, like sweeping across the nations kind of thing. But now, right now, we're in like this really weird state where we can't unequivocally say like cannabis is healthy because there's so many weird products and formulations on the market. And that's insane to me to be back here a little bit.
Yeah, I do feel like we've kind of hit that part. And I talk about this all the time. If you've ever listened to this podcast or been to one of our Q&As, I always joke that like, I thought we'd be done by now. I thought our work would be complete. And then, you know, I figured when things started legalizing in 2012, it was only a matter of time. I was like, it's only a matter of time before people get access. And then shortly thereafter, I realized like, oh, even when people have access, they don't understand this plant at all. And I think that that's if I have a rant, like if I get one rant, I mean, I kind of side ranted on yours. I have one rant. It's just that people still have no idea. They don't know how CBD works, right? These things that I thought, oh, these are basic. We can explain this to people. They don't know how it works. They don't know why. They've, seen it in a soda. They maybe tried it a few times and like, oh, no, maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. Things like CBG, like that could be really helpful for people. And people still only know smoking cannabis. I mean, it's the number one category. Category number 2 is the loathed vape pens. And then category 3 is low dose edibles filled with sugar and bullshit. And so like when you look at the cannabis industry from the outside or from a plant medicine aficionado perspective, you're like, look, that's all okay. But, from my perspective, ingestion is greater than inhalation in almost every situation. And I have some theories on why, but time again, I see when people start incorporating ingesting cannabis consistently over a long period of time, they get better results than smoking cannabis. But that is always what people think about when I say that I work in cannabis, or when I say, oh, I use cannabis for X, Y, and Z in my own health. They assume that I'm talking about smoking, and I'm like, whoa, like we're still in the stoner age, like we're still just in this thing where the stigma is very real. The effects of prohibition are very much like a dark ages around this particular plant medicine. We also are not giving it its due respect as a psychedelic, as the psychedelic renaissance is coming out, and how powerful it can be for not just your physiological body, not for just for your emotional health, but also for helping shift your consciousness, which I believe many people are starting to realize and come around to. Like that is a huge basis of health, is being able to shift your consciousness out of what we're locked into, right? Being able to bypass that default mode network and change your actual behaviors and your lifestyle and see things differently, and be able to walk in the world with a little more peace and a little more love and a little more joy. Those things are highly important that get devalued a lot in all these conversations. And so I think that's kind of my bone to pick. That was a lot of bones too.
I put that bone in here because people always say like, hey, we've been using cannabis for thousands of years. But for most of those thousands of years, we were ingesting it. We weren't smoking it. Smoking has like ceremonial history. And yes, some people have been smoking it for a long time. But in general, when people were using cannabis, especially right before prohibition, it was in tincture form. And those tinctures were meant to be drank, basically. And especially in the States, you would find cannabis tinctures in many medicine cabinets. It was commonly recommended by the doctor, and you just go to the pharmacy and pick up your cannabis tincture. And it's just because of prohibition that we're in this kind of like cannabis smoking is the thing. That's also like new and based on prohibition.
Well, and then it also leads to like the things that people still think are not great about cannabis, like that idea that the inhalation is tied to, right? That creates the stoner, stereotype, which is true for many people. And many people have that experience. They smoke a little weed, then they're like couch lock, they eat a bag of chips and like, see, this is what this cannabis thing is all about. And you're like, no, no. There are some people who can smoke cannabis regularly all the time. And it obviously doesn't have those same impacts, which, we're talking about in a later episode. But for many people, that is the effect, especially if you're not doing it in a ceremonial, meditative, intentional state. If you're just smoking cannabis with some friends, that it might be like the 70s show where, like it's panning around to each character and you're all giggling and telling jokes. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's a very limited perspective on what this plant can do. And I think that's the thing that still gets at me, and that I think is even difficult. Yeah, is it difficult still as a cannabis educator? Yeah, it bothers me when I talk to people, and I feel like I always have to give a precursor and say, like, when I talk about, I educate people on medical cannabis, I always have to use the M word so that like as to qualify, or cannabis is a plant medicine, depending on who I'm talking to and what I feel like they might be most receptive to. But even though I'm not saying like, I'm an educator on weed smoking, like, like that is the perception. And I just wish more people tuned in to what cannabis can be and what can do for them outside of that very limited bubble. And you know what? Hey, I was going to say I have a solution. There you go.
Your solution.
Well, my solution is that there need to be more of us out there, more people who are having these conversations, whether or not you're doing it professionally or you're tuning into this, listening because you're curious and you want to learn more. like, that George Washington Carver thing, right? Anything will give up its secrets if you love it enough. And so if you love cannabis, like tune in and learn some of its secrets and then share those secrets, because we're just at the beginning of this. And I think that's something that you and I need to keep in mind too. When I think about Dr. Carver's really long history, I mean, he was doing this for 47 years. His peanut moment, his soil testing moment, that didn't come 10 years in.
That wasn't day one. Yeah.
That was not day one. He was like, great, got the job. Now I have the solutions to all the things. It came from him tuning in and listening to what both plants and people need. And that's our job too, right? Tuning in to listen to what the plant needs from us and what people need from us. And when I say like tune into what the plant needs from us, like there are many ways to take that. But when I'm just thinking about where it deserves to be, where I believe it deserves to be in the medicine cabinet, first and foremost, right? I think it has a place in every medicine cabinet. I also believe that there are places for it in shifting the consciousness, which again, I believe we really desperately need for the health of humanity. Like I really think that that's something that could be really, really helpful. When we're talking about smoking cannabis, I don't want to villainize that, because it is doing the same thing if you're going to inhale and do it in an intentional space with the idea of shifting your consciousness. I think that there's definitely, I know that there's a place for that. I know that there is. That's all I have to say. That's my solution is to love it. Just continue to love it and be curious. I don't want us to lose sight of what's really important and what's really exciting, which is the cannabis is coming back. You cannot put the toothpaste back in the tube. The cannabis world and access is never going to be smaller than it is today. It keeps expanding. Germany just legalized. Like all these countries are starting like a domino effect it's having in Europe. So I'm really excited about the level of access. We just can't forget that education is not keeping up pace with the access that we currently have and with the access that is coming. So if you're listening to this podcast, please join us. Please become a cannabis educator. We do have a program. If you're curious about that, you can always shoot us an email at support@wakeandbake.co, or you can go to cannabiscoachinginstitute.com. We train cannabis educators, not just to rant, but to also help people with solutions and answering the questions that kind of come out of this place where people are so in the dark about cannabis and they really don't know how much it can help. So that's all I've got to say. Do you have any last minute thoughts?
Oh, I still have more to rant about. We're not done.
No,
we'll do another rant for the next 25 minutes. We haven't even touched on people who are in jail for what we're doing legally, like on the daily. Do you know? Like I've got stuff to say. So
okay. Well, we'll do another one of these. Yeah, we'll come back. We don't want to overload you with too much. Go check out cannabiscoachinginstitute.com. We usually have a free class up there. Maybe there will be a book. Go check it out. Check out the resources, and we'll see you in the next one. You know what he invented? When I was saying like, okay, this 300 thing, it felt like it was a shtick. You're like, this peanut thing, like how can you think of 300 uses for peanuts? And he didn't invent peanut butter, but he invented peanut paste. I think it's close. Yeah. Face powder, shampoo, shaving cream, hand lotion, insecticides, glue, charcoal, rubber, nitroglycerin, weird, plastics, axle grease, and more. So
I kind of feel like he just put peanuts in everything. Like he was just like, I'm going to look around my house and find 300 things. Like I'll put peanuts in it and say like, this is a potential use.
I don't know. I'm going to have to go further down this George Washington Carver rabbit hole because it reminds me of cannabis. I remember when I was talking to someone who did venture capital for cannabis companies. And so like companies would come to pitch him all these different ideas in cannabis. And I remember like the CBD kitty litter or the CBD pillowcases and like all of these things. And I'm just like, it is kind of funny when you're like, well, now we've got this plant and there's going to be an awful lot of it around. What are we going to do with it?
Yeah. Put it in literally everything.
Yeah.
Including upper hoo-has. Like, did he ever think of like peanut suppositories? Like he missed out on one. You need to look this up.
301 uses for peanuts.